The Adventure of the Retired Colourman. That morning, Sherlock Holmes was in a philosophical and melancholy mood. His alert, high-strung nature was subject to these sudden reactions. "Did you see him?" he asked. "You mean the old man who just left?" "The same. Yes, we met at the door." "And what did you make of him?" "A pitiful, futile, broken creature." "Exactly, Watson. Pitiful and futile. Is not all life like that? Is his fate not the fate of all humanity in miniature? We reach for something. We grasp at something. And what is left in our hands at the end? A shadow. Or worse, a sting. Is he a client of yours?" "In a way. He was sent to me by Scotland Yard. You know how doctors sometimes send incurable patients to a quack. They argue that they can do no more themselves, and it can at least do the patient no harm. What is his trouble?" Holmes took a rather soiled visiting card from the table. "Josiah Amberley. Formerly, he tells me, a junior partner of Brickfall and Amberley, manufacturers of artist materials. You may have seen the names upon boxes of paints. Amberley made a small fortune, and when he was 61 years of age, he retired from business, bought a house in Lewisham, and settled down to enjoy his rest after years of tireless labor. Anyone would have said that a secure and peaceful old age lay before him." "Yes, quite true." Holmes took an envelope upon which he had made some notes in his own hand and glanced over them. "Retired in 1896, Watson. Married in early 1897. A wife 20 years younger than himself, and a good-looking woman, if the photograph does not lie. Wealth, a wife, leisure, it seemed a life of ease. And yet within 2 years he is, as you have seen, the most miserable and broken being that crawls beneath the sun. But what has happened? The old story, Watson. A treacherous friend and a fickle wife. This Amberley has, as far as one can judge, only one passion in life: chess. In Lewisham, near him, lives a young doctor, also an enthusiastic chess player. I have noted his name, Dr. Ray Ernest. Ernest was a frequent visitor at the house, and if a close relationship developed between him and Mrs. Amberley, it was only natural, for you will agree that our unfortunate client cannot boast of physical attraction, whatever his hidden virtues may be. Last week, the pair disappeared into the unknown. What is more, as hand luggage, the unfaithful wife took the old man's strongbox, containing the lion's share of all his savings. Can the fugitive be found? Can the money be recovered? To the world, it is a commonplace problem, but to Josiah Amberley, it is a matter of life and death. How will you act? You see, my dear Watson, as things stand, we must first decide how you will act, if, of course, you are willing to represent me. You know that I am entirely occupied with the case of the 2 Coptic patriarchs, and I expect the conclusion of it today. I really cannot spare the time to go to Lewisham, yet evidence collected while the scent is fresh is of the highest value. The old man was most insistent that I should come, but I explained the difficulty. He is ready to receive you in my place. I am at your service, I answered. To be honest, I do not think I can be of much use, but I shall be glad to do what I can. And so it happened that on a bright summer day, I set off for Lewisham, little dreaming that within a week the event I was going to investigate would be the talk of all England. It was late in the evening when I returned to Baker Street with the report of my journey. Holmes's thin figure lay in his deep armchair, a wreath of pungent tobacco smoke curling slowly above his pipe. His eyes were lazily half-closed. One might have thought he was dozing, but if I faltered or made a mistake in my story, those lids would lift and his gray eyes, keen and sharp as rapiers, would pierce me with a searching look. Mr. Josiah Amberley's estate is called the Haven, I began. I think, Holmes, it would interest you. The house is like a decayed aristocrat who is forced to live among commoners. You know the sort of place. Monotonous brick houses, dreary suburban streets. And then, suddenly, in the midst of it all, such an old-world villa, a tiny island of ancient culture and comfort behind a high, sun-cracked wall, spotted with lichens and covered with moss. A wall which cut the poetry. Watson, Holmes interrupted sternly. The facts are clear. A high brick wall. Quite so. I should never have guessed it was the Haven, but luckily I asked a bystander who was strolling along the street and smoking. A tall, dark man with a large mustache and a military bearing. In response, he nodded toward the house I was looking for and, for some reason, gave me a sharp, searching look. I remembered that a little later. Hardly had I stepped through the gates when I saw Mr. Amberley hurrying down the driveway toward me. I had noticed something unusual about him even this morning, though I had only seen him for a moment. Now, in the light of day, his appearance seemed even more peculiar. I, of course, took care to study him myself. Holmes interjected, "But I'm still interested to hear your impressions." He looks as though care has literally bowed him to the ground. His back is hunched as if under the burden of a heavy load. Yet he is not nearly as frail as he first appears. His shoulders and chest are those of a giant, though this powerful torso is supported by dry, spindly legs. The left boot is wrinkled. The right is perfectly smooth. I did not notice that. You, of course, did not. But I did not miss the fact that he has an artificial leg. However, pray continue. I was struck by those strands of gray hair snaking out from under his tattered straw hat and the frantic, wild expression on his deeply lined face. Very good, Watson. And what did he say? He began to pour out the story of his misfortunes. We walked together down the driveway, and I naturally kept my eyes wide open. The garden is completely neglected, overgrown, and wild. Everything grows as it pleases, obeying the whims of nature rather than the art of a gardener. How any decent woman could have tolerated such a state of affairs is beyond me. The house, too, is neglected to the last degree. The poor man evidently feels this himself and is trying to set things right in his own way. At any rate, he had a thick brush in his left hand, and a large pot of green paint stood in the middle of the hall. Before my arrival, he had been busy painting the doors and window frames. He led me into his shabby study, and we talked for a long time. Naturally, he was disappointed that you did not come yourself. He said, "I did not really expect it, especially after suffering such a heavy financial loss, that my humble self could seriously attract the attention of such a famous man as Mr. Sherlock Holmes." I assured him that the financial side of the matter had nothing to do with it. "Yes, certainly," he replied. "He does it for the love of his art. But perhaps in my case, he might find something of interest. Even in the sense of studying human nature, Dr. Watson, for what black ingratitude! Have I ever denied her anything? Is there another woman who has been so pampered? And that young man, I wouldn't have treated my own son better. He was as much at home here as if it were his own. And look how they have treated me. Oh, Dr. Watson, what a terrible, terrible world it is." He rambled on in this vein for an hour or more. It turns out he suspected nothing of the affair. He and his wife lived a secluded life. Only a servant came every morning and stayed until 6 o'clock. On that memorable day, Mr. Amberley, wishing to please his wife, bought 2 tickets for the Haymarket Theatre in the upper circle. At the last moment, Mrs. Amberley complained of a headache and refused to go. He went alone. There seems to be no reason to doubt this. He showed me the unused ticket which had been intended for his wife. Curious, very curious, remarked Holmes, who seemed to be listening with growing interest. Go on, Watson, I beg you. I find your account extremely interesting. You saw this ticket with your own eyes? You didn't happen to remember the seat number? As it happens, I did, I replied with some pride. The number was the same as my old school locker, 31. That is why it stuck in my head. Splendid, Watson. His own seat, then, must have been either 30 or 32. Yes, exactly. I confirm, a bit puzzled. In row B. Simply wonderful. What else did he tell you? He showed me his strong room, as he called it. It is a real vault like in a bank. An iron door, an iron shutter on the window. Impossible for any burglar to break in, so he claims. His wife had a second key, and she, together with her lover, carried off no less than £7,000 in banknotes and securities. Securities? How will they turn them into cash? Amberley said he has given the police a list of these papers and hopes they cannot be sold. That night, he returned from the theater around midnight and found the vault robbed, the door and window open, and the fugitives gone. No letter, no note, and not a word has been heard since. He informed the police immediately. Holmes sank into thought for a few minutes. I did not see Holmes for half the day, but at the appointed hour he returned, serious, preoccupied, and deeply buried in his own thoughts. At such moments, it was best not to disturb him. Has Amberley been here yet? No, he will come. I am expecting him. We did not have to wait long. The old man soon appeared, his sullen face clearly marked by anxiety and bewilderment. I have received a telegram, Mr. Holmes, and I cannot quite make head or tail of it. He handed the telegram to Holmes, who read it aloud. Come at once. I have information regarding your recent loss. Elman, the vicarage, dispatched at 2:10 from Little Pullington, said Holmes. Little Pullington is, if I am not mistaken, in Essex, not far from Frinton. Well, we must go without delay. The writer is clearly a responsible person, a parish vicar, no less. One moment. Where's my Crockford's clerical directory? Ah, here it is. Josiah Amberley, Master of Arts, United Parishes of Mossmore and Little Pullington. Look up the trains, Watson. The next is at 5:20 from Liverpool Street. Excellent. You had better go with him, Watson. He may need help or advice. It is clear that the crisis of this business is at hand. Our client, however, showed not the slightest desire to set out. But this is sheer nonsense, Mr. Holmes, he said. What can this man know of what has happened? It is a waste of time and money. If he knew nothing, he would not have sent the telegram. Inform him at once that you are coming. I think I shall stay after all. Holmes assumed the most severe look of which he was capable. Both the police and I, Mr. Amberley, would form a most unfavorable impression if you refuse to take an opportunity that comes directly to you. It might seem that you are not truly interested in the success of the investigation. This suggestion seemed to terrify our client. Good heavens, if you look at it that way, I shall certainly go, he cried. It just seemed foolish at first glance to expect a country parson to know anything. But since you think so, I do think so, Holmes said significantly, and the matter was settled. Before we left the room, Holmes took me aside and gave me a brief instruction, which showed that he attached great importance to this trip. At all costs, he said, see that he actually goes. If he should happen to slip away or turn back, run to the nearest telephone and send me one single word, bolted. I shall leave word where I am to be found. Little Pullington was not an easy place to reach, situated as it was on a branch line. I have no pleasant memories of the journey. The weather was sweltering, the train crawled, and my companion was morose and silent. If he opened his mouth, it was only to make a bitter remark about what a fool's errand we were on. When we finally left the train, we had to drive another 2 miles to the vicarage, where we were received in a study by a dignified, solemn, and slightly pompous clergyman. Our telegram lay before him. "Well, gentlemen, how can I be of service to you?" he asked. "We have come in answer to your telegram," I explained. "My telegram? I have sent no telegram. I mean the telegram you sent to Mr. Josiah Amberley regarding his wife and his money. If this is a joke, sir, it is in very bad taste," the vicar said angrily. "I have never heard of the gentleman you name, and I have sent no telegram to anyone." Amberley and I exchanged astonished looks. "Perhaps there is a mistake," I insisted. "Do you not have 2 parishes? Here is the telegram, signed Elman, addressed the vicarage. There is only 1 parish here, sir, and only 1 parson. As for your telegram, it is a scandalous forgery, the origin of which the police shall certainly investigate. Meanwhile, I see no reason to prolong our conversation." And so Mr. Amberley and I found ourselves on the roadside in the village of Little Pullington, a place as remote and lonely as any in England. We went to the telegraph office, but it was already closed. Fortunately, there was a telephone in the small station inn, and I reached Holmes, who seemed as surprised as we were to hear the outcome of our journey. "Amazing," said the distant voice in the receiver. "Most extraordinary. I am very much afraid, my dear Watson, that there is no return train tonight. Quite unintentionally, I have condemned you to the miseries of a country inn. But never mind, Watson, you will be in the lap of nature. Nature and Josiah Amberley. You can enjoy their company to the full." I heard his dry chuckle before we were disconnected. I very quickly realized that my companion had not earned his reputation as a miser for nothing. First, he wailed about the travel expenses, insisting that we travel 3rd class, and now he loudly protested against having to pay for a hotel as well. When we finally arrived in London the next morning, it was hard to say which of us was in a worse frame of mind. "I advise you to stop by Baker Street on our way," I said. "Mr. Holmes may wish to give some new instructions. If there is as much use in them as in the old ones, they won't be worth much," Amberley snarled viciously. Nevertheless, he followed me. I had notified Holmes by telegram in advance of our arrival time, but he had left us a note saying he had gone to Lewisham and would be waiting for us there. This was a surprise, but an even greater one awaited us in our client's sitting room. Holmes was not alone. Beside him sat a grim man with an impenetrable face, a dark-haired man in tinted glasses with a large Masonic pin in his tie. "This is my friend, Mr. Barker," Holmes introduced him. "He has also been working on your case, Mr. Josiah Amberley, though independently of me. But we both wish to ask you the same question." Mr. Amberley sank heavily into a chair. He sensed something was wrong. I could see it by the way his eyes darted about and his face twitched convulsively. "What question, Mr. Holmes?" "Only one. What did you do with the bodies?" Amberley sprang to his feet with a hoarse scream, gasping for air with his bony hands. His mouth fell open. He looked like some hideous bird of prey. In an instant, Josiah Amberley stood before us in his true colors, a wicked monster with a soul as ugly as his body. He collapsed back into the chair and pressed his palm to his mouth as if suppressing a cough. Holmes, like a tiger, leaped upon him and seized him by the throat, forcing his head down. A white pill fell from his lips as they parted in a gasp. "Do not try to take the short way out, Josiah Amberley. Things must be done decently and in the proper order. What do you say, Barker? I have a cab at the gate, replied our laconic acquaintance. The station is only a few hundred yards away. We will go together. You may stay here, Watson. I shall be back in half an hour. In the powerful frame of the old colourman lay a lion's strength, but in the hands of such expert captors he was helpless. Despite his writhing and struggling to break free, he was hauled into the cab, and I was left to keep a lonely vigil in that sinister house. But not half an hour had passed before Holmes returned, accompanied by a young, dapper police inspector. I left Barker to complete the formalities, said Holmes. This is the first time you have met Barker, Watson. He is my hated rival and competitor from the other side of the Thames. When you mentioned a tall, dark man, it was not difficult for me to complete the picture. He has several successful cases to his credit, hasn't he, Inspector? Yes, he has crossed our path more than once. The inspector replied reservedly. I don't deny that he uses irregular methods, as do I. The irregular, is sometimes very helpful. You, for instance, with your mandatory warning. Anything you say may be used against you would never have managed to actually wring a confession out of this scoundrel. Perhaps so, Mr. Holmes, but we get our man in the end. Surely you don't think we hadn't formed our own opinion on this case and wouldn't have caught the criminal? You must excuse us, but it is hard not to feel slighted when you, with your forbidden methods, get ahead and reap all the laurels. Nothing of the sort will happen, McKinnon. I promise you that from this moment on, I shall remain in the background. As for Barker, he did only what I directed him to do. The inspector cheered up visibly. That is very handsome of you, Mr. Holmes. To you, praise or blame means very little, but we are in a different position, especially when the newspaper men start asking questions. Quite right. Since they are bound to ask you questions in any case, it is just as well to have the answers ready. What will you say, for instance, if some clever and brisk reporter asks what particular clues first sparked your suspicion and finally enabled you to establish the true facts? The inspector hesitated. We are not yet in possession of the actual facts, Mr. Holmes. You say that the prisoner attempted suicide in the presence of 3 witnesses, and thereby practically confessed to the murder of his wife and her lover. Do you know of any other facts? Have you ordered a search? 3 policemen are on their way. Then you will soon have the most undeniable of all facts in your possession. The bodies are undoubtedly nearby. Examine the cellars and the garden. It will not take you long to check the most suspicious spots. The house is old, but the water pipes are new. There must be a disused well somewhere. Try your luck there. But how did you find it all out? And how did he do it? First, I will tell you how he did it, and then I will give the explanation to which you are entitled, and even more so my long-suffering friend, who has provided me with invaluable assistance. But first, I would like to give you an idea of the kind of mind this man possesses. It is a most extraordinary one, so much so that the criminal, in all probability, faces not the gallows, but Broadmoor. Amberley is gifted with traits of character that, in our minds, are far more typical of a medieval Italian than an Englishman of today. He was a miserable miser. He so tormented his wife with his penny pinching that she became easy prey for any adventurer, who soon appeared in the form of this chess-playing medic, Ernest. Amberley played chess excellently, a characteristic mark of a man capable of plotting intricate schemes, Watson. Like all misers, he was jealous, and his jealousy grew into mania. Whether there were grounds for it or not, he suspected betrayal. He set out to take his revenge and began to build a plan of vengeance with devilish ingenuity. Step this way." With confidence, as if it were his own house, Holmes led us down the corridor and stopped at the open door of the strong room. "Faugh! What a terrible smell of paint!" cried the inspector. "That circumstance served as our first clue," said Holmes. "You may thank Dr. Watson, who noticed it, though he failed to draw the proper conclusions. It was that which set me on the right scent. Why should this man, at such an inconvenient time, fill his house with such a stench? Obviously, to drown out some other smell that might betray his guilt or arouse suspicion. Then came the thought of this room, this very one, with its iron door and iron shutter, a room that could be sealed hermetically. Combine these two facts. Where do they lead? I could only establish this by inspecting the house myself. I no longer doubted that something serious was afoot, for I had managed to make inquiries at the Haymarket Theatre and, again, thanks to Dr. Watson's observation, found that neither seat 30 nor 32 in row B of the upper circle had been occupied that night. Consequently, Amberley was not at the theatre, and his alibi collapsed. He made a gross blunder in allowing my far-seeing friend to notice the number of the seat his wife was supposed to have occupied. Now the question arose as to how to inspect the house. I sent my agent to the most remote village I knew and summoned Amberley there at an hour that ensured he could not possibly return quickly. In case anything went wrong, I gave him Dr. Watson as a traveling companion. The name of the worthy parson was, of course, taken from my Crockfords. Am I making myself clear? It is incomparable, the inspector whispered in a tone of awe. Now I had no fear of being disturbed and could quietly break into another man's house. The profession of a burglar has always tempted me, and had I chosen to follow it, I have no doubt I should have risen to the top of the field. What did I find? You see this gas pipe running along the skirting board? Splendid. It rises along the wall, and there, in the corner, is a tap. The pipe, as you see, is carried into the strong room and ends at that plaster rose in the center of the ceiling, where it is hidden by the molding. The end of it is left open. At any moment, by turning the outside tap, the room could be flooded with gas. With the lever turned to the full, anyone in this small room, with the door closed and the shutter down, would not remain conscious for even 2 minutes. By what devilish trickery he lured them in there, I do not know, but the moment they crossed the threshold, they were at his mercy. The inspector examined the gas pipe with great interest. One of our men did mention a smell of gas, the inspector said. But of course, the window and door were open, and the place was already reeking of paint. He claimed he had begun the painting a day before the tragedy. But what happened next, Mr. Holmes? Next came an incident that was somewhat unexpected even for me. Early at dawn, as I was stepping down into the garden from the pantry window, a hand suddenly gripped me by the collar, and a voice said, "Now then, you rascal, what are you doing here?" When I managed to turn my head, I saw the tinted glasses of my friend and rival, Mr. Barker. It was a comical meeting, and neither of us could restrain a smile. It turned out that at the request of Dr. Ernest's relatives, he had also undertaken an investigation and had also concluded that something was amiss. He had been watching the house for several days and had noted Dr. Watson as a highly suspicious character who had visited the villa. He could not very well arrest Watson, but when he saw a shadowy figure climbing out of a window before his very eyes, he could no longer hold back. I explained the situation to him, of course, and we continued to work the case together. Why with him? Why not with us? Because I intended to subject Amberley to a little test, which succeeded so brilliantly. I feared that you might not have agreed to go quite so far. The inspector smiled. Perhaps not. Well, Mr. Holmes, if I understand you correctly, you are withdrawing from the case entirely and handing over all your material to us. Exactly. It is my usual rule. Then I thank you on behalf of the force. The case, as you explain it, is clear enough. We shall likely find the bodies without much trouble. I will show you a small but grim piece of physical evidence, Holmes continued. I am certain Amberley never noticed it. To succeed, Inspector, one must always try to put oneself in the other person's place and imagine what one would do. It requires a certain amount of imagination, but it pays off. Suppose, for example, that you are locked in this tiny room with less than 2 minutes to live, but you wish to get even with the monster who is perhaps still mocking you from behind that door. What would you do in that case? I would leave a note. Precisely. You would want to tell people how you died. Writing on paper is useless. The killer would find the message. But if you write on the wall, someone else might read it. Look here, just above the skirting board, written in red indelible pencil. Oui, and that is all. What does that tell us? You see, the writing is no more than a foot from the floor. The poor soul wrote it while lying on the ground, dying. And before he could finish, he lost consciousness. He meant to write, "We were murdered." That is exactly how I interpreted the message. So if you find an indelible pencil on the body, we shall look for it. You can be sure of that. But what about the securities? It's clear there was no robbery, and yet he really did own those shares. We checked. He has them hidden away safely. Mark my words. When the story of the flight began to be forgotten, he would have suddenly discovered them and announced that the culprits had repented and sent them back, or perhaps dropped them along the way. Yes, you have an answer for every difficult question, said the inspector. One thing I cannot understand. He was forced to come to us eventually, but why did he ever go to you? Pure bravado, Holmes replied. He fancied himself such a clever fellow. He was so sure of himself that he imagined no one could beat him. And afterward, he could say to any suspicious neighbor, "Look at the lengths I went to. I went not only to the police, but even to Sherlock Holmes himself." The inspector laughed. "We shall have to forgive you that even, Mr. Holmes," he said. "I have never seen a more skillful piece of work." A few days later, my friend tossed a copy of the bi-monthly North Surrey Observer onto my lap. In it, under a series of blood-curdling headlines, ranging from the ghoul of the Haven to brilliant success of police detection, was a full column giving the first sequential account of the case. The concluding paragraph illustrates the style in which it was written. The remarkable foresight shown by Inspector McKinnon in concluding that the smell of paint might be intended to mask some other odor, such as gas. His daring hypothesis that the strong room might prove to be a death chamber, and the subsequent investigation resulting in the discovery of the bodies in a disused well, cleverly concealed by a dog kennel, will live in the history of detection as a striking example of the high efficiency of our police force. Well, McKinnon is a good fellow, Holmes remarked with a condescending smile. I suggest you add this to our archives, Watson. Someday the true story of this affair may be told.